It happened back when this guy was still working on a construction site in Sok Trong. At that time, one of his friends was tormented by those evil spirits in long dresses. Those spirits drove his friend to jump from the 10th floor and die instantly, on the ground. Up until now, the spirit of the girl in the pink dress, along with the spirit of a rose, and some of his other friends have occasionally appeared, sometimes even hand in hand, right in front of the gate of a large hospital in Sok Trong. That story had many mysterious details, so if anyone hasn't heard it yet, you can go back and listen to episode 54 titled The Pink Long Dress. And the story he tells today is actually a continuation of that episode 54, because after he witnessed that scene, his colleague jumping from the 10th floor, he immediately quit that line of work. He never followed construction projects again. After deciding to quit, he started trying out many different trades. Later, he studied and earned a driver's license, eventually becoming a driver. He said that being a driver was a career guided by his spiritual mentor, so during his time on the road, he also encountered many supernatural stories. The one he's telling today is one of them. After finishing his driving license, he met and befriended a man named Tai. They got to know each other through the Drivers Brotherhood group, which connects people in the driving profession. Anyone who works as a driver would surely know about this group. It's like a hub to link drivers together. At that time, since he had just started driving, his skills were still weak, so he was eager to practice more to strengthen his steering. That's why Tai often taught him many tips and shared a lot of driving experience. Since they were both in the same line of work, they became quite close. Then, one day, Tai was getting married, so that afternoon, he had to drive down to his wife's house in Gyeongryang, Kiengyang. So at that time, Tai asked him to drive him to Gyeongryang in the afternoon, then loop back to Kanto. The next morning, he would drive Tai's relatives from Kanto to Kiengyang to attend the wedding at the bride's house. In short, he had to make 2 trips. The first one was from Kanto to Gyeongryang, then back from Gyeongryang to Kanto. The second trip early the next morning was from Kanto down to Gyeongryang again. On the very first trip, from Kanto to Gyeongryang to bring Tai to his wife's home, it was actually Tai who drove, since he didn't yet know the way from Kanto to Gyeongryang. At that time, there were only the 2 of them in the car. Tai was at the wheel and he sat in the passenger seat. While riding in the car, he noticed something odd near the area close to Tai's wife's house. On one side of the road, there were clumps of bamboo and tam vong, a type of bamboo, while on the other side, by the riverbank, people had planted bushes of bua, a kind of shrub. But these bushes were unusually tall, much taller than a person's head. Normally, those bushes don't grow that high, but as he described them, they were towering. Anyone who has ever traveled that road from Kanto to Gyeongryang would recognize it. One side filled with bamboo and tam vong, the other side running along a canal, completely lined with those tall bushes. While driving, Tai glanced at him and said, "Hey, remember this stretch of road carefully. I'll explain at the junction later." After Tai dropped him off at the bride's house, it was already around 6 p.m. He stayed to have a few bowls of porridge before preparing to head back to Kanto. By the time he got into the car, it was already past 7 p.m. Right before he left, Tai reminded him, "Do you remember that stretch of road I told you about earlier? Listen carefully. On your way back, if someone waves for a ride, whether it's a woman walking or someone asking for a lift, don't ever stop. Don't let anyone into your car. If you happen to run into her, whatever you do, don't look back. If you've already passed her, fold your rear view mirror down and just keep driving straight. Don't look behind you. Don't stop for anyone. Understand? No matter what, don't pick anyone up." Hearing that, he felt strange and asked, "Why though?" But Tai didn't explain. He only said one thing. "Don't ask, just do exactly as I said. When you get home, text or call me to let me know. Then get some sleep early, so tomorrow you can drive my relatives down to the wedding on time." So he agreed and set off for Kanto. He described that road as extremely deserted at night. Even though it was only 7 or 8 p.m., all the houses had already closed their doors and turned off the lights. Along that stretch, houses were sparse, maybe one house every 100 to 200 meters, not close together like in the city. The road felt empty, dark, and eerie. What's more, that stretch of road had no streetlights at all since it was in the countryside. He said that if you go from Gyeongryang back toward Kanto, then on your right-hand side would be local houses, with some trees in front of them, and on the left-hand side would be a canal. Along that canal, it was full of bushes, reeds, and tall grasses. As he drove along the canal for a while, he eventually reached the section of road that Tai had warned him earlier to pay special attention to. When he got close to that stretch, he turned on the car's high beams because it was so dark and empty, and he needed better visibility. Once he turned on the high beams, he noticed something. From the opposite direction, there was a child walking slowly toward the car. As he drove closer, he suddenly saw that child jump from the bushes on the right-hand side of the road, straight across to the tall shrubs on the left side. The child leapt across the road and then vanished. Seeing that, he was stunned. He thought to himself, "That's strange." This was a rural road, yes, but wide enough for two cars to pass each other, which meant it had to be at least 4 meters across. How could a child leap effortlessly across 5 or 6 meters like that? He estimated the child to be only about 7 or 8 years old. No way a child that age could have that kind of superhuman ability. But since he'd been all over the place working and had already encountered many supernatural events, including the terrifying story in episode 14, he immediately realized that this child was not human. At that moment, he remembered what Tai had warned him that morning. If he saw anything strange, he had to fold down the rearview mirror. Then it dawned on him. The reason was probably so he couldn't see the back seat through the mirror just in case something suddenly appeared there. If that happened, he would have been scared out of his mind. So he folded down the mirror and drove straight home without looking back. At that time, his house was in the Honglone residential area, opposite the central bus station in Kanto. That neighborhood was still under development, so he had to park his car about 200 meters away from his house. The spot was actually a cleared area where the ground had been leveled. He said he had parked his car there many times before. Whenever he came home tired late at night, he wouldn't bother returning the car immediately. Instead, he would just park it there and wait until the next morning to take care of it. That night, just like before, he parked at that same spot. It was on a sandy road where people had recently dumped sand to level the ground. Normally, whenever he parked there, the car never got stuck. But for some reason that night, almost as if something supernatural was at work, the moment he drove into the spot where he always parked, the two front wheels suddenly sank into the sand. He tried pressing the gas to move forward, and after a while, the two rear wheels also sank. At that point, the car was completely stuck, firmly lodged in the sand. He stayed inside the car and tried every possible way, but no matter what, the car wouldn't budge. The wheels had only sunk down about a few centimeters, yet the vehicle simply couldn't move. Completely exhausted, he finally called his parents-in-law to come and help. They tried digging out the wheels and filling the holes with stones, but it still wouldn't work. Then he called several neighbors over. In total, 9 people worked together to try to push the car out. Some dug the holes deeper, some poured in stones while he sat inside, stepping on the gas and shifting gears to try to get the car to climb out. But no matter what they did, the car wouldn't move. In fact, the more they tried, the deeper the vehicle sank. And he explained, the car was a 7-seater manual transmission, rear-wheel drive. That meant only the 2 rear wheels had power, while the 2 front wheels stayed locked in place. So under normal circumstances, there was no reason the rear wheels couldn't push the car out. Yet that night it just sank deeper and deeper, as if some unseen force was holding it down. He said, anyone who knows how to drive a car would surely understand this situation. By then, everyone was already exhausted. But since he had to wake up at 5 a.m. to pick up passengers, the car had to be pulled out no matter what. With no other option left, he had to call the roadside rescue team to come and tow his car. The rescue crew used steel cables to pull the car out. But strangely, each time they hooked the cable to his vehicle and started pulling, the cable snapped. It broke not just once, but a total of 4 times. Finally, on the 5th attempt, when the tow truck tried pulling again, the tow truck itself got stuck. In the end, they had to call in a second tow truck to pull out the first one. The situation just became more chaotic. The second, larger tow truck then tried from a distance to pull his 7-seater car out. But again, the steel cable snapped. That meant the cables had broken 5 times in total. At that point, the driver of the rescue truck jumped out of his cab. His face had gone pale, and he told him, "I've been driving tow trucks for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like this. I've pulled heavy trucks out of deep ditches before, and even then I could manage. But your 7-seater car, I've tried 5 or 6 times already, and I still can't pull it out of this shallow pit. I'm telling you, whatever is holding this car down, it's not something human. Just leave it until morning." After saying that, both tow truck drivers left without taking any payment. By then, there was nothing else he could do. He went back inside, took a quick shower, and tried to get some sleep while waiting for daylight. But he couldn't really sleep. Just as he dozed off, he dreamed of a child sitting in the back seat of his car. When he woke up in the morning and opened the car door, he saw the entire back seat covered in sand. This was impossible. He had been driving alone the night before, sitting only in the driver's seat. He always kept the windows tightly shut. There was no way sand could have gotten inside, especially on the back seat. Around 6:30 a.m., some of the members from the Drivers Brotherhood group messaged him, asking for his location so they could come and help. The night before, after he told Ty about everything that happened, Ty had posted in the group asking for assistance. That morning, 5 drivers from the group showed up to help. Among them was an older man. This elder lit a cigarette and slowly walked around the vehicle, inspecting it carefully. After circling it for a while, he finally stopped in front of the car's hood. The older man stood in front of the car's hood. He lit a cigarette, then sat down on the ground and did some sort of ritual. After that, he stuck the cigarette butt into the soil. A short while later, just as the cigarette had almost burned out, he got up, opened the car door, turned the key, and with just one start, the car came right out of the sand pit as if nothing had happened. He said at that moment he couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. Just the night before, even with 2 tow trucks, not a single one could pull the car out. Yet that morning, this man simply lit a cigarette, did something briefly, and the car was freed effortlessly. The older driver then told him, "You're still new in this profession, so you don't know about these things yet. Next time, if you run into a situation like this, don't panic. Just ask someone knowledgeable to perform a small ritual, and once they've finished, the car will start up again." He thanked the drivers for their help, then continued on to pick up the relatives, some of the aunts, and drove them down to Gyeongryang for the wedding at the bride's house. But strangely, that very same night, he came down with a fever and cough that lasted for an entire month without getting better. Later, he met up with Ty at a coffee shop. Over their conversation, he told Ty everything that had happened, including the part about encountering the child. After hearing him out, Ty suggested they return to that very stretch of road where he had seen the child. So the 2 of them bought some fruit as offerings, stopped by the spot, and made their prayers. He said astonishingly, right after the ritual, his fever and cough disappeared instantly. He was completely fine again. From this, he concluded that being a driver is a profession closely tied to the spiritual world, which is why people call it Bakhau's trade, a trade under spiritual guardianship. Drivers often encounter supernatural events and must also observe many taboos. He swore that the story he told was 100% true, without adding or altering any details, and many witnesses could confirm it. Through this story, he wanted people to understand that it's not just drivers who need to make offerings and prayers before work. No matter what profession we're in, we should always show respect to the unseen spirits before starting our tasks. And that was the end of a chilling story about the spirit of a child in Gyeongryang, Gyeongyang. Next comes another story equally fascinating. This one is about the spirit of a woman who in life was extremely greedy and selfish. It's a continuation promised at the end of episode 75, the episode titled The Tale of Trung Tang in Kantho, which a listener had submitted after 3 deaths happened one after another in her family. The following story took place at her aunt's house in Ben Tre. Episode 75 about Trung Tang was already an especially gripping one, so if you haven't heard it, go back and listen to it. She and her husband had agreed to travel to Ben Tre, to her aunt's house, to help repair and renovate the place, since her uncle, her aunt's husband, was a war veteran, classified as. Because of that, the government gave them a comradeship house on a plot of land. In that area, there were only 2 houses. The first was Auntie and Uncle Hi's house, and right next to it was a plot of land belonging to Mrs. Nam. When Mrs. Nam was alive, she lived with her daughter. Back then, she was infamous for being very selfish and narrow-minded. Since the 2 families lived next door, whenever Uncle Hi's chickens accidentally flew into her yard, she would immediately throw stones at them until they scattered. Because of that, when Mrs. Nam passed away, very few neighbors went to her funeral. While alive, she never treated people with kindness or affection, so in the end, only her children attended her funeral. No one else cared to show up. One time, when the storyteller visited Auntie Hi's house, she heard her aunt say, "After Mrs. Nam died, she's been haunting people constantly." In front of both Auntie Hi's house and Mrs. Nam's old place on the opposite side of the road, there was a coconut grove. The owner of that grove was very wealthy and didn't really care about it. They just planted coconuts for the sake of having them, leaving the grove neglected. No one maintained it, so when the coconuts ripened and fell, they just lay there. Naturally, Auntie and Uncle Hi often went over to collect those fallen coconuts. But because of Mrs. Nam's greedy nature, she too would go there to pick coconuts. The 2 households often quarreled and competed with each other. If Auntie Hi's family had already gathered everything, leaving nothing behind, Mrs. Nam would scold and curse from morning until night. Her yelling was so loud it nearly made your ears burst. The storyteller's hometown was in Cantho, a city. So when she visited Auntie Hi's rural home in Bentre, she really enjoyed the fresh air, gardens, and peaceful countryside atmosphere. That afternoon, she sat behind the garden with her aunt, while her aunt plucked out her gray hairs. As they sat there, she suddenly heard sounds coming from inside the abandoned house. It sounded like someone bouncing on a bamboo hammock, making the distinct bep, bep, bep noises. A bamboo hammock is very thin, so if someone even slightly sat on it, it would creak loudly. She heard it, but at first didn't pay much attention. Her Aunt Hi, who seemed to know what was going on, quickly told her, "Let's go inside, dear." She asked, "Why? It's cool sitting out here." "Why? Do we need to go inside?" Aunt Hi didn't explain directly, but she knew they were being haunted. Still, she let her stay a little longer. As her aunt continued pulling out her gray hairs, the noises grew louder and louder. Finally, Aunt Hi couldn't take it anymore and said, "Come on, let's go in now." She grabbed her niece by the arm and pulled her straight into the house. Later, when they told Uncle Hi about it, he just said, "Oh, you 2 were sitting right on Mrs. Nam's old land. That's why her spirit was messing with you." Uncle Hi once told us, "Just the other day I saw a dry coconut fall from the tree beside Mrs. Nam's old house. I picked up a stick and was about to cross over to get it. But when I looked through the window of her house, I saw her climbing down from the altar. I got so scared. Still, I tried my best to grab that coconut and hurried straight back home. Her ghost keeps haunting like that, but honestly, after a while, people stopped being afraid because she appeared too often, and she was very real." Then Aunt Hi said, "Maybe she doesn't allow anyone to cross into her land to take coconuts. That's why she keeps haunting." The storyteller admitted that during the first 3 months she stayed there, she didn't encounter Mrs. Nam's ghost. But one day, the second child of Auntie and Uncle Hi suggested, "Come on, let's go behind the hedge and shake down some coconuts to drink." Since she had just come from the city, she was very excited. They shook the trees, and coconuts, both young and old, came falling everywhere. She happily carried armfuls of coconuts back into Aunt Hi's house. When Aunt Hi saw, she exclaimed, "Heavens! How dare you pick Mrs. Nam's coconuts? You're done for, girl. Tonight she's going to come and scare you for sure." Everyone laughed and teased her about it. That night, Mrs. Nam's spirit really did appear. But the girl wasn't scared, almost like someone who didn't know the power of a gun. The next few days, she became addicted to it. Every day, she ran to the coconut grove, shaking down all the fruits, young, old, didn't matter. She piled up a mountain of coconuts in the house, delighted at her bounty. But then, what was meant to come eventually came. The following morning, She was supposed to wake up early to help Aunt Hai cook for the bricklayers who were building the new house. But no matter how much her husband shook her, she wouldn't wake up. Worried, he rushed to call Aunt Hai. When Aunt Hai came in, she saw the girl burning with fever, lying unconscious. Her body temperature was alarmingly high, up to 43 degrees, the highest fever she had ever experienced. Panicked, they rushed her to the local clinic. The doctors gave her medicine to bring the fever down, and only by noon did she regain consciousness. At that point, Aunt Hai told her, "See? Yesterday you shook down coconuts from Mrs. Nam's land. Now she's come to punish you. When I get home, I'll prepare food for her spirit and beg her not to harm you anymore." That afternoon, Aunt Hai offered a meal to Mrs. Nam's altar, pleading with her to stop haunting the girl. The very next day, the girl's health was restored. Sometime later, when the construction of Aunt Hai's house was finished, they held a housewarming celebration. The girl's parents also came over to attend. During the gathering, after the feast, her mother pulled her aside and whispered, "Daughter, it seems like you've been getting too restless and meddlesome over here.